Happy Easter. I imagine this is the most unusual Easter most of us have ever experienced. Most churches on this Easter Sunday, like ours, will not be meeting together. In fact, it's the first Easter in America in over 100 years that most church buildings will be empty today on Easter Sunday. You know, the Bible promises that God works all things together for good. We know that God uses our trials to test us. 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 7 says that God uses the trials of our faith to test the genuineness of our faith, because our faith is of greater value than gold. But as I was preparing this message and preparing to celebrate Easter Sunday with you today from our homes, I realized that God not only uses trials to test us, He uses trials to teach us. And I believe God is using this viral pandemic to teach the church, or to remind the church, that the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which occurred 2,000 years ago, is still a vital, up-to-the-minute reality in the lives of believers today. For example, God is using this coronavirus to remind us that we don't just go to church, we are the church. Now, one of the fallouts of this pandemic is that churches are not meeting together for now. And don't get me wrong, I miss that. I love our church family, and I love meeting with them. But it occurred to me before this viral pandemic that almost every time we talked about the church, we were talking about going to church. God has used this pandemic to remind me that we don't just go to church, we are the church. Look at what God is doing through the church right now, even though churches aren't meeting together. Neighbors are taking care of neighbors with the Spirit of Christ in their hearts, doing it in Christian love and kindness. Christian groups are providing food and medical supplies for their communities. Christian workers in hospitals are there on the front lines, and not just doctors and nurses, but the maintenance crew, the cafeteria workers, the environmental services workers who go into the rooms to clean, hospital administrators, and on, physical therapists, respiratory therapists. They are there on the front lines with the Spirit of Christ in their hearts as they minister to the sick. I saw a video the other day of Christians in Brazil who've gone out into their neighborhoods, still maintaining the social distancing we're asked to maintain, but they've gone out into their neighborhoods and they are praying for their nation. God is reminding us in all of this that we don't just go to church, we are the church. I saw a headline the other day, it was online, one of the online newspapers, and it had a picture of an empty building, an empty church building, and the headline was, "Churches across America have been emptied." Well, it's true that all across America, and probably all across the globe, church buildings have been emptied. But the church hasn't been emptied. The church has been deployed. The church has not been silenced. The church has been unleashed. And so remember, Christian, that you are the church, wherever you are. You are the church in your home. You are the church when you go to the grocery store. You are the church on your job if you're still going to your job each day. You're the church in your neighborhood, wherever you are, because we don't just go to church, we are the church. Second thing God has been teaching me or reminding me is that as Christians, even when we are not together, we are connected. We hear a lot of talk right now about social isolation. But this viral pandemic has been used by God to remind us that far from being isolated, we are connected to Christians all across the world. last Sunday, Mary and I, from our homes, we worshiped with a worship team that was leading a praise service in Australia. Later, we watched or listened to a sermon from a Christian pastor in South Africa. And in the past few weeks, we've participated in worship services online from Mesquite, Nevada, Harlan, Kentucky, Fresno, California, Rosario, Argentina, St. George, Utah, Columbus, Mississippi, Sarasota, Florida, and Lebanon, Missouri. Now, in most cases, we didn't know any of these people, but we were connected to them through the Spirit of the risen Christ. In many ways, this viral pandemic has actually brought Christians closer to one another. Many churches like ours are sharing messages on Facebook and YouTube, or streaming services online. In some cities, Christians are having virtual prayer gatherings. Believers from various denominations joining together as one in a spirit of prayer and unity. Only an enormous crisis could have accomplished that. There's a great Christian song from the 70s that says, "We are one in the Spirit. We are one in the Lord." That's more than a song. That's a reality. And God is using this present crisis to teach us just how much of reality that is. God is using the coronavirus to unite us as one family of believers and to remind us that even when we are not together, we are connected. One other thing. God is using the coronavirus to remind us that Jesus is alive and at work in the world today. And I have seen more evidence of that in these past few weeks than I think I have ever seen in my lifetime. Many years ago, a friend of mine who was an atheist at the time told me that the reason he couldn't believe in God is that he couldn't believe in something that he couldn't see. Well, the coronavirus has reminded us that just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not real. This coronavirus that has changed your life is less than 1/25 millionth of an inch. For decades, the world has waited in fear for something big like an atomic war to change our lives. Instead, a tiny object that looks like a soccer ball with spikes and can't be seen with the human eye has brought the world to a standstill and has us huddling inside of our homes. The virus is tiny, but so powerful. God's power is like that. We don't always see it, but the evidence of it is all around us. Look what God is doing in the world right now. He's using this tiny virus to unite believers and to get the church out of the building. He's using this virus to bring some wayward Christians back to him. I've heard testimonies of Christians who had strayed from the Lord, but God has used this coronavirus to bring them back. God is even using the coronavirus to bring some people to faith in him for the first time. Major Bible sellers like Tyndale, Lifeway, and Alabaster have all reported record Bible sales in the last few weeks. Maybe we needed a crisis to bring people back to God. Maybe we needed a crisis to unite us as Christians and to start focusing again more on what we have in common than on what separates us. Maybe we needed this virus to remind us of what truly matters in life. I know that it feels like we're in the darkness right now, wondering when all of this will be over. And that's why the message of Easter is so important to us today, so timely. We read in John chapter 20, verse 1, on that first Easter morning, that while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, and she saw that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. This Easter, in the midst of the darkness, God is shining a light. But the message of Easter is more than just that God is shining a light in the darkness. The message of Easter is that in the midst of our deepest darkness, Jesus rose from the grave to overwhelm the darkness forever. I know these are faith-testing days, and you may feel that your faith is as small as the coronavirus. But even if your faith is small, don't give up. Don't waver. Don't doubt God. Because the size of your faith is not what matters. What matters is the object of your faith. And as Christians, the object of our faith is the risen Lord Jesus. Today, as Christians, we proclaim this message. Jesus Christ has risen from the grave. And as that great hymn says, because he lives, I can face tomorrow. And as we face tomorrow, we will remember that we are the church, even when we're not in the building, that we are connected, even when we are not together, and that Jesus Christ is alive and at work in the world today. Happy Easter, everyone, and may God bless you today and always.